You can sue your employer for unfair dismissal from day one. And that is really, really worrying. And what we're trying to get people to understand today is this is not big, bad business. This is the human being at the centre of every small business, on your high street, in a business park near you, who is worried about the future. And what they're looking at is, well, when I have a vacancy, maybe I don't, maybe I don't fill that vacancy. Maybe before these changes come in, I'll actually have to cut jobs. It's horrible. It's the worst decision that any business owner wants to do. But they are feeling very, very vulnerable, and they're very worried about these proposals coming in full.
And are we already seeing this have an impact, if you like? There's actually some surveys suggesting that people are recruiting fewer people already. That actually confidence when it comes to employment, particularly among small businesses, has already been weakened, if you like.
That's right. We've seen, if you look at the payroll stats, you can see that pay is actually, and the number of people actually on the payroll stats has reduced in the small business part of the economy. You see the number of jobs in the labour force survey. I know it's a controversial survey from the government at the moment with its veracity, but that also reflects the same. So we're starting to see the economy beginning to change. And if small businesses are the ones who are most fragile, but also the ones where you're going to get the growth that we need to see, and small employers are those who recruit those furthest from the labour market in our local communities. So effectively, this package hits the economy, it cuts the numbers of jobs. And unfortunately, the worst people impacted will be those furthest from the labour market, at a time when we've got 9.3 million people out of work who are economically inactive but could be. So I just think the whole agenda has gone a bit too far, a bit too fast, and there are some sensible changes the government can make, such as looking at a 12-month level. At the moment, for unfair dismissal, you can do it after 2 years, and we think, going back to what the Labour government, the previous one, did at 12 months, would be a way to improve rights but protect the economy. We hope Keir Starmer's listening.
And so does that mean, I suppose the question is, what do small businesses now think about this Labour government? I mean, Labour spent a lot of time before the election trying to claim they're business friendly. They won business over largely, didn't they? Is that still the view amongst the people that you talk to?
I'd say, to be completely direct, it is a mixed record, but there's some really good stuff. The late payment stuff they're doing is really, really strong. And within the tax rises that were just being debated, they did a small business carve-out, improving the employment allowance, which was our original idea, which takes £10,000, more than that, £10,500 off the employer NICS bill. So they clearly got small businesses in their sights. And what we now need to see in 2025, this is the year where we want to see that, if you like, enlarged across policy, and that includes in this agenda on the employment rights legislation too.
And just finally, Craig, I mean, it is the start of the new year, isn't it? Are you optimistic about 2025? As I said, the economy's not in a great shape. What's your view of how things may well pan out?
Well, you've got the growth stats that have been, flat for some time now, and looks as though we've got a moderate, perhaps to low growth over the next year. And then hopefully, perhaps the government will come out with some rocket boosters. Can it do the industrial strategy right? Can it can it change its employment legislation? Can it sort out late payments? There's ways in which it can do stuff that will then make small businesses feel that they can expand to a second premises. Maybe they can employ more people. Maybe they look at a more part-time model for their business, so they can employ more people, which faces the change in the threshold of national insurance. So there's all sorts of things they can do, and we just want them to take a breath and say, look, this government's in for the next 3, 4, 5 years. We need a pro-growth agenda that has small business at its centre, and that's what we're talking about today.
OK, Craig, appreciate your time on this Monday morning. Craig Beaumont there from the Federation of Small Businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the day's stories. And the Transport Secretary will set out plans in Parliament later to begin a consultation on the phasing out of the sale of new petrol and diesel cars by the end of this decade. The aim is to provide clarity for manufacturers and charging infrastructure investors. But there will be no change to the target of ending new petrol or diesel cars by 2030, with all new cars and vans to be 100% zero emission by 2035. Aldi recorded its best ever festive period, with sales topping £1.6 billion in the 4 weeks to Christmas Eve. The UK's fourth biggest supermarket saw total sales increase 3.4%. Aldi managed to sell a record of 350,000 fresh British turkeys and more than 400 tonnes of British beef and almost 3 million British Brussels sprouts. And New York City has today introduced the first ever congestion charge zone in the United States. Cars will be charged up to $9 a day, with rates varying depending on the type of vehicle. president-elect, and of course, New York native Donald Trump has resisted the plans. But the chief executive of the Metropolitan Transit Authority in New York said that he was confident the scheme would survive his return to the White House. And don't forget, you can get more on that and indeed the rest of the money news. Just scan the QR code that's on your screen right now for the very latest, online or indeed on the Sky News app. Now, it's the first day back at work for many of us following the festive break, which means it's a good time to look ahead to the next 12 months and see what we might expect from the stock market in 2025. Well, let's speak to Scott McCubbin, IPO leader for the UK and Ireland at Ernst & Young. Very good morning to you, Scott. And let's look back, if we can, before we look forward. How did London do last year?
It was a difficult year. I can't deny that. It's a difficult few years, to be honest with you, since 2021, 22, 23 and 24 have both been slow years. I'd call them the doldrum years, quite frankly. I don't think it's been a strong performance by the London markets or the global markets, quite frankly. So it's definitely been slow, but with some green shoots coming for 25.
You talked there about the global markets not being the best year, but was it more difficult for London?
No, I don't think so. I think it has been a difficult period for equity markets. There has to be the right conditions for equity markets, and it just hasn't been that. I think it's been a slower 24 than we expected. I think we expected 24 to bounce back faster. I think inflation has been much more stubborn, interest rates have been much more stubborn globally, and that has had an impact. So I think it's been overall slow, but I think there's definitely some opportunity in 25 that we're seeing as inflation starts to stabilise and as interest rates start to come down.
Yeah, as you say, last year was one of the quietest years for the London Stock Exchange. What gives you optimism, if you like, for this coming year?
Well, what the IPO market really likes is stability. It likes things to be much more steady state. And I think we have that. I think there's political stability for a longer period of time. We're seeing global economic factors just basically be much more steady state. So inflation being much more under control. When you've got high inflation, then you don't really get the GDP growth that you're looking for to drive the IPO market. So that lower inflation base, that lower interest rate base definitely gives us reason to be cheerful into 25.
And we talked about kind of the global IPO volumes as well, didn't we? And India actually did, I think it topped the chart, didn't it, for the first time last year?
By number of transactions. US actually was the top of the market for proceeds. So that was healthy and it's strong. But actually the US, if you look at the US year over year in proceeds, it's fairly flat as well. It's not really boomed. But I think everybody expects that Europe and the US and globally, quite frankly, will really increase. China actually was the outlier there. China actually has restricted some of its access to IPO, so its numbers actually fell, and that dragged down all of Asia effectively.
And for people watching, Scott, they look at the US economy as being kind of performing quite well, hasn't it, for the last couple of years. Less so here in the UK, that we did have a strong start to 2024, but that has tapered off. How much of it is there a connection, if you like, between the wider macro economy and what we see in the stock exchanges in London, New York and elsewhere around the world?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a connection between the global economy as opposed to the UK economy. I think the fact that we have been lagging behind as a UK economy to the US doesn't actually come into it. It's more those global factors that I talked about, inflation and interest rates, that really the driver. So as you see the overall market start to come back and interest rates declining and GDP start to recover, globally, that will have its impact. The real impact in the UK exchange has been regulatory change, and that's been the driver that we're going to see really start to come through into the future years, as over the next 4-year cycle, say. That will be the thing that we're going to track and monitor. Does it actually get those tech stocks that London so craves, quite frankly, to come to the UK as opposed to the US or Amsterdam? Yeah,
and just finally on this, and that's the fascinating thing, isn't it? A lot of people have been quite down on London over the last couple of years, but you're a little bit optimistic that things may well improve.
I am. I absolutely am. And we see our pipeline. Our pipeline is very strong. So I would expect, 3.4 billion this year. I would expect that over 10 billion in the next year, and then looking to increase that in terms of the number of IPOs that happened. 18 this year. I'd expect that to be 30 or 40 this year.
OK, Scott, fascinating stuff. We will be covering it, of course, here on Sky News. That's Scott McCubbin there from EY. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we'll be looking at how the markets are doing. It's been a quiet start to the year for the FTSE 100. All the details after this quick break.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakoulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
You want to talk business? Meet me in the On-Board Lounge. Fly Emirates. Fly better. Thank you.
So welcome back. Let's have a look at the markets in more detail now. I'm going to start with Asia-Pacific region, which fell overnight as investors assessed business activity figures from several key economies in the region, pretty red across the board there. Here in Europe, markets have enjoyed a more positive start to the session, with momentum driven by technology and auto stocks up 2.3 and 1.4% respectively. In London, the blue chip index has risen in line with Europe, but only at a fraction, up 0.04%, dragged down actually this morning by the advertising giant WPP and also by Rolls-Royce, as you can see there, both down over 2.5%. On the foreign currencies, the pound is up substantially, actually nearly 1% against the dollar, while had ceded ground to the euro, but actually is up also just a fraction at 120 there. Meanwhile, on the commodities, a barrel of Brent crude is up at $76.76 for a barrel of Brent crude. OK, let's speak to Ross Mould, Investment Director at AJ Bell. Very good morning and Happy New Year to you, Ross. Can we start, though, with supermarkets? Many of us will have spent some time in them over Christmas. We're getting a sense of how well they've done. And yet again, Aldi did pretty well.
Good morning to you, Darren. Yes, Aldi's announced a record Christmas, and it's particularly put that down to its sort of premium price range, its specially selected range that it outlines for its customers, and that seems to have been particularly popular. Follows on from good numbers that we had from Lidl last week, and that now seems to set the tone for what we'll get from Tesco's and Marks and Spencer's on Thursday and Sainsbury's on Friday. I guess what investors will want to know is this an overall strong market? Is it price? Is it volume, or to what degree are the discounters continuing to eat the lunch of all of their major competitors?
Well, indeed, and it is fascinating. You know, the German discounters are doing particularly well, and it is coming at the expense of people like Asda and Morrison's.
Yeah, if you look at the data that the consultants Kantar provided, that's been a consistent trend for some time. Tesco has actually been holding its own particularly well, as has Sainsbury's. The biggest losers, as you say, Morrison's and Asda, perhaps a little bit more in that lower price, more budget range, and that's where the greatest competition or the greatest heat is being felt from those German discounters who have been continuing to open floor space and take share as a result.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You can't help but notice, you can physically see it on the high street, can't you, Ross? Let's move on to China now, if you like, because it's not been the best start to the year, has it?
No, I mean, there was a big bounce in the Chinese stock market last autumn when there were a number of stimulus initiatives announced, interest rate cuts, loosening the amount of the regulations on banks and how much that they could lend. But investors haven't really yet been convinced that this is the right thing to do. It's still China's almost still trying to promote more investment in property and real estate when it really needs to be boosting private consumption, and again, not just infrastructure spend and building bridges to nowhere. Tariffs remain a big concern from President-elect Trump, and so the Chinese stock market is down about 4% this year already, and the borrowing cost for the Chinese government continues to plunge. It's the lowest level that I can find on the system I was looking at this morning, going back 20-odd years, which suggests that maybe more interest rate cuts are coming, and investors are genuinely concerned. You have a bit of a disappointing year ahead coming yet again from the Chinese economy.
And that's in contrast, isn't it, to the United States, which is doing well at the moment, but there are concerns about debt and inflation. I just want to end, though, Ross, on AI. It was a big year last year for artificial intelligence, much talked about. And yet it seems that at the start of 2025, that money continues to plough in.
Yeah, for the moment the boom goes on. Microsoft has just announced an $80 billion investment plan in AI this year. Where that will go, we'll find out, but I'm sure that it's got NVIDIA shareholders licking their lips as far as chipsets are concerned, and server and data center providers as well. You've also just seen that filter through to Taiwan with Foxconn, a big contract manufacturer, saying it had its best fourth quarter ever. It particularly flagged AI, and again, servers is a big reason for that. Intriguingly, it was a lot cooler on smartphones. Let's see what that means for Apple's numbers towards the end of this month.
And just quickly, Ross, what's the view from investors? You know, this is a bit of a gamble, isn't it?
AI, I mean, It's intriguing. I mean, there's been an awful lot of money putting into it. I think at some stage, yes, investors will want to start to see a return on these multi-billion-dollar capital investment programs. There are some business models out there. Whether they can actually turn into money or not is still, in some cases, to be proven. ChatGPT being an open case in point.
Indeed, yeah. I'm going to have to see how that plays out. It is definitely a narrative that's not going to go away. Ross, for the time being, thank you, as always, for your analysis. Ross Mould there from AJ Bell. Happy New Year back to you as well. OK, well, that is it for me on Business Live for this morning. We're back, of course, at 4:30 this afternoon. Do join me then if you can. Coming up next, it is the very latest news at midday, including more on Keir Starmer's speech this morning, that row with Elon Musk. Stay tuned for that. Until this afternoon, though, goodbye.
Good afternoon, this is Sky News Today. It is midday, the top stories. The Prime Minister defends his role in tackling child exploitation and hits out at the online debate over grooming gangs.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims, they're interested in themselves.
Sir Keir Starmer also unveiled plans for tackling NHS waiting lists. He's pledged to cut them by nearly 500,000 over the next year. Also today, severe weather warnings are still in place for large parts